Good morning, everybody. I'd like to ask you to remain silent as we pay respects to Councillor Peter Connor, who died recently. Thank you. Thank you. Can I ask you to remain standing while Monsignor Smith leads us in prayer before we start the meeting?
So as we gather, we pray for the world in which we live, that experiences conflict in so many areas, often as a result of injustice or abuse of power. So we pray for all in leadership and positions of influence on the international stage, that their minds and hearts may be moved by a genuine desire and search for peace and justice. And we pray for our own nation, that all in government of whatever persuasion may work together for the common good. For the city of Salford, for our mayor and councillors and all the administration, that they may work effectively together, inspired by a common vision for the good of all its citizens. And for all those who work in the voluntary sector, in organisations and community groups, both faith-based and secular-based, that they may continue to grow and bear fruit for the people of our city, especially for those in greatest need. And for a greater awareness of the need to care for our planet Earth, our common home, and that this may lead to responsible decisions that respect it. Mindful of the Salford councillors, active and retired, who have died during this past year, that they may receive the reward of their labours, and that we may experience the fruits of their labours for the city, and we remember their families. And we make these and all the prayers and desires of our hearts to God in the name of Jesus, who lives and reigns forever and ever. Amen.
I've only had notification of one matter of urgent business, and I would propose that we hear that between item number 7 and number 8 on the agenda. It relates to the appointment of the city solicitor and returning officer. Is that agreed?
Not returning, it's a monitoring.
I have only one item of urgent business special announcement that relates to the city solicitor appointment, and I'd like to take that between item number 7 and number 8, if that's agreeable. Yeah? Thank you very much. Do we have any apologies for today's council meeting? Any apologies for today's council meeting? Mike, do you have any apologies? Thank you. Any declarations of interest, either personal, any? No? So going then to the minutes of last meeting dated 20th November. Can we accept them as a proper account of the meeting that we sat in? Councillor Garrido.
Yes, I'd just like to make a comment, Chair, on minute number 47 in relation to the bus consultation. And members will recall that the Conservative group abstained at that meeting on the basis that we wanted to consult further with our residents so that we knew what their views were before submitting our own views based on their responses. I just want to confirm that the Conservative group did in fact consult ourselves with our residents, and that in fact we submitted our consultation on the 6th of January. Thank you. We're quite happy to forward a copy if you would like to see it.
Thank you, Councillor Garrido. Do we have any petitions that need to be handed in? Councillor Joly. And so we're going to item number 6, membership of committees and panels. And I'll hand over to the Chief Executive who will be able to update us on what happened.
Just move the report. Item 6, membership of committees. I think it's City Mayor's right to do that, actually.
Yeah.
Shall we?
No, fine. Happy to move the report. Yeah, good question. I did actually send an email to all councillors last night confirming the state of play with regards to the mayoral team. Colleagues will know that we've no longer got Councillor Stones obviously serving in the council but also leading on children's. That's moved to Councillor Merry with Councillor John Walsh, but also Councillor Ferguson, as you know, oversaw industrial relations, workforce and equalities in the city. And my thinking behind this is rather than create another lead member role is to have 2 executive supports, one reporting into Councillor Tracy Kelly, leading on equalities, social impact and communities, and the other reporting into Councillor Bill Hines, leading on the industrial relations and workforce aspects of those roles and responsibilities that Councillor Ferguson had. Hopefully you understand that. Also, I was thinking about the Great Eight, so manifesto priorities and how we've been discharging them through the mayoral team, and you'll be aware that one of my priorities in the local authority is social impact. At the moment, I don't think that's adequately reflected within the mayoral team, and obviously Councillor August will be looking at how we forge ahead with social impact in the city, given that it is one of the mayoral priorities. So yes, that is my thinking. If anyone's got any other questions, please feel free to email me on those matters.
So Miranda is looking at it as we speak. So thank you, Councillor Saunders, for taking me back to the agenda item that should have been on. The parliamentary and local elections are going to be reported on by Jim.
Aware of the results have been well publicised. So just to note item 7, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now, the next agenda item we agreed at the beginning is again back over to yourself, and it's a report on the appointment of the city solicitor and returning officer. So.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a report that this week the final interviews took place for the city solicitor and monitoring officer due to the retirement of the current post holder, Miranda Covers-Watt. The cross-party appointment panel did appoint Sian Roxburgh, who's currently a chief legal officer at Blackburn and Darwen Council, and she has been appointed, and the Constitution does say that Council needs to approve that appointment. So we're just asking for your approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Can the Council approve the appointment? Yes. Councillor Saunders, do you want to ask a question? Thank you. Next item is number 8, and it's a report that Councillor Lancaster is going to present on Salford Community and Safety Strategy. Councillor Lancaster.
On it, so it's now gone out again, and this is the revised version we've got after that second round of consultation on the plan. That plan will now go out to public consumption, and they'll be able to make comments on it. The one thing which was rather good this year, which is slightly different from what we've done in previous years, is we've had the response rates of 3,250 residents across Greater Manchester to the overall plan by Greater Manchester. In the case of Salford, that's meant that 325 people per year will be surveyed, different people every time, to actually see about the report as we go. But it is a working document which we continue to monitor over the last 3-year period of the activities we're dealing with in crime and disorder and where we need to take action. Thanks very much.
Any questions to Councillor Lancaster? So the Council is asked to accept and approve the report that he's just offered. Is that agreed? Thank you. The next agenda item then is Salford Local Plan and Development Strategy and Management, and that's going to be presented to us by Councillor Antrobus. Councillor Antrobus.
Can I refer members to pages 51 to 3,462 of the agenda? I do apologise for the amount of literature coming through. to you today, but we thought that it was only right and proper that with this important document, members should at least have the opportunity to access all of the relevant background documents. Can I begin by thanking those officers who've been involved in the extensive and intensive work that's been involved in producing this this document. We've got a very small team based in planning, and they not only work for Salford City Council, they also do a lot of work for the Association of Greater Manchester Combined Authority. I'd like to personally thank them. Matt Doherty, Jimmy McManus, Claire Thorne, Francis Taylor, Steve David, Andy Chatterton, Fiona Fryer, Amelia Lucas, and of course Dave Percival. And of course towering above all that has been Chris Findlay, whose advice I think all of us have respected and trusted over many years, and the way that he's been able to pilot this through the choppy waters of the ever-changing planning system in the ever-changing city has been a wonder to watch. So special thanks to Chris Findlay. I'd also like to thank all members of the City Council, because the production of this document has been, I think, a genuinely inclusive exercise. At earlier stages, we've involved all members in workshops, thematic workshops on each aspect of the plan, and we took on board what members told us in those meetings. And nothing in this document will be unfamiliar to members, because we reported back in a couple of sessions, I think last month or the month before, on how we were intended to respond. So I think that there is genuine buy-in by members in the policies laid out here, and I know that maybe that is helped, because this is part one of the plan, and part two of the plan, which will involve the allocations and the review of the Greenbelt, will come at a later stage, and I'm sure that they will naturally be more controversial. I'd also like to thank members of the public and the industry for the consultation responses that they have given. Town planning originated as an attempt to tackle the major social evils of the day. The consequences of urban areas which had been created by the sort of untrammelled capitalism of the 19th and 20th century. And it was a recognition that the places that were created by those processes were unhealthy, poor environments, and people did not have the opportunities that they should have done. Our cities, instead of being places of hope and progress, became prisons for many of the most deprived people who lived in them. And town planning was an attempt to unleash, to release people from those conditions. But I'm afraid that it seems to me that in recent decades, town planning has been a numbers game. It's been about the profits of developers, it's been about meeting government targets. And what we've tried to do in this document is to take planning back to its roots, back to its ideals. And we have tried to put fairness at the heart of this document. In a growing city like ours, where there's so much development going on, it is totally unacceptable that at the same time we should see so much poverty. And we believe as a council that the people of Salford should benefit from the development that is going on. We can't ask planning to solve every problem, but it should play its part in addressing the central concerns of our community, of our mayor, of this council, and that is the belief that we have that we must tackle the problem of poverty in the city. And so this document begins with a policy about fairness. It talks about fairness to the people of the city by having an inclusive planning process, making sure that everybody has a say and is involved in planning. It has a policy, and I think that this is probably a first in the country on social value, where we've worked with the UK Green Building Council's recent research on this, and we've delivered a policy on social value, which will mean that every developer in the city will have to say how their development and how their ways of working are going to benefit the people of the city, and that will include a requirement to sign up to the Mayor's employment charter. It's extraordinary that in a development industry where we see eye-watering profits, where we see eye-watering bonuses, that the conditions for construction workers are so appalling, and hopefully we will go some way towards addressing that. There's a policy in there about inclusive places. You know, it's fundamental to my beliefs that in any city, everyone should have the right to that city. Everyone should be able to use the public spaces, no matter where they come from, what their background is, what their abilities are, what the colour of their skin is, whatever. They should be able to use those public spaces. And planning can help to do that by making sure that those spaces are designed to be as inclusive as possible. And so we have a policy in there which addresses that. And most important of all, for me, there is a policy in there which calls on us to be fair to future generations, to recognise that what we do today, in the developments that we produce today, we will ensure that the future generations do not suffer, particularly from the impacts of climate change. And those principles of fairness enshrined in that first central chapter of this document I shot through the whole of the document. The challenge I put to officers was explain why each and every policy in this document will make life fairer for the people of the city of Salford. And once this is adopted, that will be our challenge to the development industry. How are your developments going to make life fairer for the people of the city of Salford? And that is why we have named this document A Fairer Salford. We believe that this will return town planning to its roots, that is the most radical planning document that this city has ever produced, and I commend it to the council.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Any questions? Any comments? Councillor Karen Garrido.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I start, can I say that, and this will be probably a first or a second, that I totally agree with everything that Councillor Antrobus has said. With regards to the officers and to this policy. I did try to read it all. I didn't quite get to the end, so I'm glad you used the first bit because that's the main bit that I read. Having said all that, and I also want to thank the officers for the work and the way that they have been open to suggestions that we've all made of whatever party, and I have to thank them for that. And to Chris, thank you very much for the support that you've always given to us. I have, unfortunately, got to say something, Mr. Mayor, with regards to the second part. I am very upset that part 2 has been put and left. That was, I understand the first bit, I understand all the policies, but what happens to our green belt and on our housing figure is of great concern to everybody. Out of the 700 replies, I understand it was 200 commented, if I'm right on that figure, correct me if I'm wrong, actually commented on the green belt and what land was actually going to be used. So I want to concentrate on that if at all possible. I am, if you look at it on the executive summary, it says, we will protect the city's most important environmental assets. I think our environmental assets cover our green fields and our green spaces. It says the 4 stages of consultation have already been undertaken in the local plan, all which related to the full local council plan. And that was what we were working on, was the full plan. And those were the comments that came in. It then goes on with some absolutely fantastic things about how we actually arrived there, and it seems to have been going on forever. It seems to be that 2013, I think it was the first time, and we've actually been out and done our draft regulations. I then read that it comes down to the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework, and that is the reason why we are here today, not as far as I can see doing the whole plan. This is the most worrying part for me, and I think a lot of councillors. When the Greater Manchester Mayor was elected, he promised that a fresh look would be taken with regards to development on the green belt. That, Mr. Mayor, was 4 years ago. The Greater Manchester Spatial Framework was then delayed. We had meetings here with, I know that Mr. Finlay was actually involved in that, and I know that we had meetings with Councillor Walsh and Councillor Ferguson and myself, right, looking at this. And we've actually had another delay. I wonder whether, and I'm being probably a bit cynical here, it's because there is an election in May. I'm not sure whether, because he's not done anything, it's better to just not do anything at all. But I want to say to you, City Mayor, you are the mayor of our city. You know, right, how this city feels about the serious threat to our green belt. You had proposals consulted and added to you were going to add to our green belt. And I have to say, that was absolutely fantastic. That was brilliant noises to our ears, right? But I read, and the thing that worries me, Mr. Mayor and City Mayor, right, is that we read in the Manchester Evening News last night about Peel on Broadoak. We all know what's happening there. It's gone to the Court of Appeal on our local plan, right? Not having the figures, right? I am concerned that they are now talking about 20% or 30%, ours is 20%, they're going to put forward 30% of this. So I'd like to say to you, City Mayor, right, please, can we do part 2 of this local plan to get it out there and to actually do something? I don't know whether there will be a change, whether Andy Burnham will be the next mayor of Greater Manchester. I don't know that. You might know more than I do, but I don't know that. We should not agree. Yeah, we should not agree to just doing part 1. And I'm asking that we actually reconsider at the Cabinet that we actually do part 2 as well. Thank you.
Councillor Mr. Gruder.
So, and to Councillor Antrobus. My concern is almost exactly the same, and I can't not but stand up and express the feelings of our residents in the areas that we represent about the delays that are now being caused in terms of not including the local the green belt and green spaces within our area in Part 1. People do see this as a devious way of maybe trying to push it to one side, let's forget about it for a little while, and then when the elections are out of the way, the May elections are out of the way, then we'll get down to taking what we want to take. And I think that would be a very backward step, you know, not just for the city, but generally. We're talking about climate control. There was a report on Radio 4 this morning, and I think the report was actually done by Exeter University, if I'm not mistaken, and they interviewed about 25,000 people throughout the country. And it was saying what a major part green spaces and green belt plays in our health and in our climate and so on. And yet here we are in the council today, not including it within the first part of the local plan. I do worry, as Councillor Carrington has said, that the Greater Manchester Mayor is up for election again in May. When he was elected the first time, he did say he would sort this out. He's had 4 years to sort it out, and I just hope he's just not going to jump ship without doing anything. And as I say, you know, maybe he has other contenders for the post city mayor. I don't know. But whatever it is, this is the most serious issue that needs to be dealt with and should have been dealt with under the first part of that, if it was going to be split in two. And the second point, in fact, is obviously in relation to the housing figures. You know, every public inquiry that I've attended and been involved in, the housing figures have been a most important aspect of those inquiries. And I do think it's difficult to understand why we're not getting that full information within Part 1. So, while clearly today the local plan is before us just for noting, and therefore there's no reason to go vote for or against at this stage, you know, I do hope that the comments that we're making will be taken into account, you know, and that due haste will be taken in relation to dealing with the green belt, the green spaces, so that people throughout our city, whether it be Earlham and Cadishead, or whether it be Worsley and Boostown, that they know where they stand with their green spaces and what support they're going to be getting from the Greater Manchester Mayor as well as from the City Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garrido. City Mayor.
Obviously, this is questions to Councillor Antrobus on the report he's just produced to Council, but I felt as though members of the opposition were actually questioning myself, actually, which is quite interesting. And I feel as though I have to stand and respond to some of what's said, because I was listening quite intently to what Councillor Karen Garrido and Councillor Robin Garrido said. And what I find absolutely amazing were there was no utterance at all about the government's role in all of this. You'll know we've been writing to ministers, we've been liaising with Secretary of States around government laying the regulations to enable Greater Manchester to pursue a spatial development strategy. That was happening way before the recent general election. And needless to say, we've got nowhere on that. We were hearing warm words prior to the general election, but the latest update I've had is the regulations aren't seemingly a priority for this government at this point in time to enable Greater Manchester to get on with the job of pursuing a spatial development strategy. That requires your government to actually lay regulations to allow Greater Manchester to get on with the job. That has not happened. So please don't come to this council chamber saying that somehow this council are dilly-dallying by not pursuing part of our local plan, or the spatial framework is being held up by the Mayor of Greater Manchester, because that is absolute nonsense. And also, in addition to that, we've regularly updated this council chamber on where we're up to on matters relating to the spatial framework. Colleagues in this council chamber will know at the moment Greater Manchester are doing some really detailed work looking at viability across Greater Manchester to inform allocations within the spatial framework moving forward. In addition to that, we're also well underway with transport studies across Greater Manchester, because the allocation of land is one thing, but actually ensuring that when development does come forward, people can move around the city region is equally important. And can I just please say, please rest assured that I don't want to rush strategic planning within Greater Manchester. I want to do a proper and thorough job. And that is what we in Greater Manchester in this council chamber are committed to. And if that means things taking time, then so be it. Because at the end of the day, we are here to serve the people of Salford and Greater Manchester. And it is incumbent upon us as elected representatives and as people who hold public office to do a thorough job when it comes to such strategic and important issues. On top of this, there was no mention in what you said about the government's commitment to delivering 300,000 homes per year by the mid-2020s. There was also no reference in what you said to the delays around, population projections, housing projections, the fact that we've got more of these coming in the new year, No mention of this at all in what you said. And as you know, we had to wait for the government to respond, to tell us what data we could and couldn't use. And at the time, you'll be aware, government said we should use the 2014 population and housing projections. Why? Because it delivered a higher local housing need number to enable your government to meet your manifesto target of 300,000 homes per year by the mid-2020s. So please don't come to this council chamber, exercising your rights and being political at the end of the day without any evidence base, because actually the people who are holding this up is your government, and you know it. So I'm absolutely appalled at what I've just heard. You're not dealing with fact, you're not dealing with rationality and logic, and I think it's shame on you and the office you hold in this city.
Thank you, City Mayor. Councillor Andrews, do you want to respond to anything?
Well, I am very grateful to Councillors Garrido for their support for this document. And I suppose it was inevitable, really. When the opposition have got nothing to oppose, they should end up discussing a document that doesn't exist and raising an issue that is not an issue. First of all, it is not true that we have delayed part 2 of the document. What we have done is brought forward part 1. We've brought it forward because we cannot wait for the government to make up its mind about the regulations on who has the power to decide about the green belt, and that's what it's all about. The government hasn't yet made up its mind. It hasn't issued the regulations to allow Andy Burnham to have a mayoral plan. So that is the reason why we are not allowed to deal with part 2 of the issues at the moment. It's simply because of that. But I think that the policies in this part of the document are so important, they're so essential to securing good development in the city, that I didn't want to wait any longer for the malingerers in Whitehall to make up their minds on this. I wanted to bring this forward, to put Salford first, to benefit the people of Salford right at the very start. So that is why this is being brought forward, because we can't wait for government to make up its mind. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I'm really dismayed about the issues that have been raised about Broad Oak, suggesting that somehow this is some kind of a ploy that in the future somehow we will cave into this. First of all, I think we remain committed to extending the green belt in many parts of the city.
Sorry, can I just on a personal explanation?
Councillor Mr Greeno will also have to make a personal explanation.
Well, if I gave the impression that I thought Salford, right, was not supporting I've always appreciated the support that this council has given with regard to Broad Oak. What I was highlighting was that last night in the Manchester Evening News, there was a regurgitated article, but in that article it says that they're going to give 30%, not 20% that Salford wanted, and that they're going to provide land for a primary school, and that they're going to do open spaces. That was my only point, is that I am so concerned, because if that goes, everything else is up for grabs. Hazelhurst, Earlham, everywhere. And I'm so grateful, City Mayor, to you and your group, right, for actually supporting the people of Worsley and Broad Oak. And I apologise to Councillor Antrobus if I gave the impression that I didn't understand or made any comment that you were not supporting us. That was never my intention.
Well, thank you very much for clarifying that issue. I think my understanding was the point that you were making is that because we haven't brought forward part 2 at this stage because of the delay in the government regulations, that somehow we weren't addressing the issue of green infrastructure in the city. And of course, the West Salford Greenway is one place that we hope to become Greenbelt once the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework is in place. That is our intention, and we remain wedded to that. But to suggest, and I think the implication was there, to suggest that this document somehow ignores that issue is completely wrong. If you look at policy G14 in this document, which is about the protection of West Salford Greenway, what that actually does is strengthen our case. And in fact, after today's meeting of the council, we will be able to give more weight to that policy, and once it's adopted in 12 months' time, then that will effectively prevent Peel from realising their ambitions on Broad Oak. So I think that this document is really important as a step towards that eventual full Greenbelt protection. This will strengthen our case against Peel, and once it is adopted, Peel will not be able to go against the policies that we already have in place to support the Greenway. So I do think that raising fears, and I don't say that Councillor Mrs Garrido was raising fears, but raising fears that somehow in the future we would come back and work with others to develop that land is completely wrong. This document actually strengthens our case, and the people in Walkden and Eccles and other parts of Worsley who rely on the West Salford Greenway should actually be pleased that we have strengthened these policies.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. So the council is asked to note the report that's just been given and recommend to the Cabinet that they approve the publication of this report. Can we agree to note? Thank you. The next agenda item is number 10, And it's back over to Councillor Lancaster, who's going to make a presentation that relates to the Greater Manchester Waste Levy and its allocation. Councillor Lancaster.
Have done a successful negotiations and contract negotiations on the main Greater Manchester Waste contract, which has achieved quite a considerable saving since that contract was awarded to Suez rather than the previous contractor. But having got the negotiation and the benefits that brings to the 10 authorities, it was important that we actually look at the LAMA, which LAMA is a method of calculation of how we'll distribute that figure and that bill to all 10 authorities. And what this document does is actually come to an agreement with all 10 authorities in Greater Manchester, how that distribution should take place within all 10 authorities. So I welcome the report and thank you and ask you to support the recommendations in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Lancaster. Any questions? Councillor Saunders. Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Any other questions? Any other comments? Councillor Toomey.
No, I just wanted to highlight, I was reading the Manchester Evening News the other day around Stockport. It seems that some of the activity that's been taking place at the Waste Authority levy and the ending of the Private Finance Initiative and these new arrangements are paying dividends in terms of returns to local authorities' budgets. I just wanted Councillor Lancaster to potentially comment on that, because obviously, you know, starting this next financial year, we were looking at a 15 million cuts target for the City of Salford. Obviously, we're working through budget at the moment, but I think some of the work that's been happening at a Greater Manchester level is helping us offset austerity and cuts in the City of Salford. And I just wanted some sort of confirmation of that, really.
No more questions, no more comments. Councillor Lancaster, would you like to answer?
That it was the case, and there was a lot of work gone on within Greater Manchester Waste to award this contract. What we actually did was split the waste disposal contract, the old contract, into 3 portions and re-tendered in 3 different contracts for the work. That achieved significant savings, and it's true to say that the PFI costs were one of the major concerns. I've got to say I've shared some concerns about the PFI contract, because the government, and I'm not being political here, refused to concede that they shouldn't have a refund for the contract which the plant was under the contract, which was the PFI contract, and demanded close on £10 million out of that contract to be paid back to government, which to me, even if he had said that all the plant was not reusable, then there would have been a proportion of that £10 million which would have stayed within the Greater Manchester authorities and not gone back to central government. Well, it has been a successful contract. What we've got to do, and I think if I can be critical of the previous contract, there wasn't enough supervision, quite frankly, on that contract. And I'm concerned that we had to go to quite legal concerns we had with the previous contractor about performance. It's essential once you award the contract that performances are measured far better than they've done in the past. So I think it's essential that we actually perform and measure the work with the new contractor. All the indications so far are good, but a monthly return on performance is critical on this. Thanks very much indeed.
no other comments, then we, the council, are asked to take note of the report and its methodologies, and are we all in agreement with taking note of the report? Seems easy enough. Thank you. Now we have a bit of a change. We have skated through the agenda this morning, and we would like to make changes in its order. Rule 13, bullet point 3, allows us to change the order of the agenda that's been set out. And so we propose that we go straight to scrutiny chairs and asking the chairs of the scrutiny committee to be able to answer the questions that we might have, and return back to the City Mayor's presentations, questions and comments at a later time this morning. As we go through the procedure of the agenda that I'm outlining, we will take the break after that time and come back and listen to the City Mayor.
So it's item 14.
And the first item that we do would be item number 14. Is everybody in agreement with that? Okay. Let's go straight on to number 14 then. Do any members have any questions or comments to the chairs of scrutiny committees? We'll go through them one by one and take them at that time. Councillor David Jolly, overview scrutiny board. Any questions? Any comments? Councillor Adrian Brocklehurst, Children's Scrutiny Panel. Any questions? Any comments? Councillor Tanya Birch, Community and Neighbourhoods.
Malcolm Morris isn't here, so we can do any questions in the bell.
Councillor Sharp, Growth and Prosperity. Any questions, any comments? Now, Councillor Morris is not here, and she is responsible health and social care. If there's any questions that you'd like to put to Councillor Morris or any comments, could you do that by email, please? Okay. Going on to number 15 then. We're looking at the discharge of functions of joint authorities and outside bodies. Again, we'll go through them one by one. Yeah. Is there any questions that people would have, or any comments that people would have for anybody that represents the council on outside bodies? No. Item number 16 then relates to reports that are being delivered to us. And again, they were just for note. Is there any questions people would have relating to the reports that have been offered to us?
No. I think we're going to item 13 now as well. Yeah, that's all right.
No. If you do find that you would like to ask questions, will you then put them on email to the different councillors that would be responsible for each of the outside bodies? Going back to number 13, we're looking at general questions or comments to the cabinet members themselves. We'll go through them one by one. Councillor Boschel, scrutiny. Councillor Collinson.
Thank you, Chair. There have been a number of reports recently in the press regarding Salford City Stadium's losses of over 2 million. What I wanted to ask really was, what is the council's position on this, and how sustainable is the council's involvement? Thank you.
Councillor Collinson, that wouldn't be a question that would be directed.
We can redirect to the City Mayor.
It's redirected to the City Mayor.
Sorry, Chair, through you, for the avoidance of doubt, Councillor, the City Mayor is the shareholder for the stadium company, so should give any answer to the council.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously, every year we consider working capital from the City Council into the Stadium Company, of which, as you'll appreciate, and members of the Council will know, the City Council is a 50-50 partner. It's a joint venture company with Peel Holdings. So, you know, what is the status of the stadium with regards to the council? So obviously we borrowed the money to build the stadium. Our land has also, as well as Peel's land, has also been put into the joint venture company. There was initial working capital agreed when we built the stadium because we know we would need to continue that. We've exhausted the initial working capital, and as you know, each year we continue to put money into the stadium to enable it to obviously fully function as a business. If we look at how the stadium company at the moment is trading, so just looking at how it's kind of operating, you know, I'm fairly reassured, speaking with Councillor Lancaster and Councillor Boschel, that it's washing its face, shall we say. So operationally, it's working. And when I say washing its face, that's not considering the repayment of principal and interest. And I suspect, I mean, board members can probably comment outside of this room on that, but from a principal and interest point of view, you know, that's why I think the stadium company is reporting a bit of a loss. However, when we look at what this means for the City Council, colleagues in the room will know we've developed some of the land. We now have a pub there, obviously providing jobs and opportunities. That's generated a capital receipt. Aldi have recently come online again. That has triggered a capital receipt back to the joint venture company. And obviously that's bringing down the principal, the debt, and obviously making things look better. And when I actually look at what is the liability, if you like, to the City Council to date over certainly the last 4 years, the overall debt and liability to the City Council is actually coming down every single year. Now, I can provide this information for you, and we are looking to take a report on the next round of working capital, which will be part 1, so it'll be publicly available for full transparency and accountability, and maybe at a future council meeting you can ask further questions once you've read the report in detail and you see how the numbers are working. But the stadium and that regeneration as part of the city, I have to say to this council, from what I'm seeing and what I'm looking at, is actually a great success. Not only is it creating jobs and opportunities in the city, but from a financing point of view, in terms of the liabilities to the local authority, they're coming down year on year to the local authority. So if we look at this in the round in terms of debt to the local authority at the moment, we're looking at the overall liability being in the region now of £15 million, you know, and originally, obviously, we borrowed 20 odd million and obviously work capital to date, but we can provide all this information in the report when we take the next decision on working capital. But I just wanted to reassure members of the council and obviously the opposition, and I know Councillor Turner has had a briefing on this, because obviously we brief members of the opposition in the run-up to taking any decisions on working capital, that, you know, we should be positive about the future direction of the stadium and that regeneration, that part of the city. And I can corroborate all of this, obviously, with hard data and facts, which I'm sure you'll be interested in, Councillor Collinson. Hopefully that provides some reassurance at this stage, but yeah, thank you.
Councillor Haynes, you want to speak?
Get up, Mr. Chair, and say that Councillor Turner has been briefed. You know, so I can understand Councillor Collinson asking the question, but Councillor Turner has been briefed, as the Mayor has said.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. Can we go back? Councillor Turner.
Can I just say, it is true that I'm always kept informed of developments, but I think Councillor Collinson's question was for a wider audience, the public, who we all represent. And I think that formed the basis of Councillor Collinson's question. Yeah. Thank you.
If you don't mind to respond to that, just to say, when we do take a decision on the next round of working capital, the report will be in part 1, and members of the public and yourselves can see that in full. so you can actually see how everything is performing in that part of the city. But personally, from what I've seen and what I've read today, I actually think it's a really good news story. Not only is the debt coming down, but we're creating jobs, we're selling land, and we're moving in the right direction in the city, which is really, really important.
Before I bring Councillor Garrido in, can I just say that once he's spoken, we're going back to the agenda to ask questions of or comments to Councillor Boshaw. Okay? Councillor Garrido.
Yes, still on the same point, Mr. Mayor, if that's okay. I accept everything that the City Mayor has said and appreciate his comments. And in fact, Councillor Turner does keep us informed when he's had the briefing, so we're well aware of what the situation is. And I think Councillor Collinson's question, in fact, was quite clear. You know, can we sustain a loss year after year after year? I'm aware that the deficit has come down, but £15 million is still an awful lot of money to most people and to most companies. So, you know, can we sustain, as a council, that loss? Personally speaking, I think the time has come when we should be looking to see if there's anybody out there that can take us over from us. You know, they can buy us off us, and we can at least clear that deficit. But I think the other thing I'd like to know, in fact, is the City Mayor has... Sorry, I was talking at the moment. But City Mayor referred to the amount of jobs it's created. I wonder if you could probably put a figure on how much that cost us per person for those jobs.
Thank you, Councillor Garrido. That's perhaps a question you might want to refer to the City Mayor at his allocated agenda item.
For that to be come after the council at some stage.
More questions for Councillor?
Any more questions to Councillor Boshaw? No? Councillor Mary? Any questions to Councillor Mary? Councillor Collinson?
Yeah, thank you. As you know, I'm very involved in corporate parenting, and this has been a great concern of mine for some considerable time. I actually sat on a jury for 7 weeks, 7 years ago on one of these cases, so I am aware of how involved it all is. But a teenager in care in the local authority, not our local authority necessarily, but in local authority care, who is raped by gangs, it's not a crime that will appear on the police's crime statistics. It's unlike something like burglaries and thefts, which can have a box ticked and they can show that they're dealing with crimes. So it has been proven that these sort of crimes haven't been given the priority that they deserve. And what I really wanted to ask Councillor Murray, as lead member for Children's, is can he assure us that there are no Salford children involved in the ongoing investigations? As you know, Greater Manchester Police have been very heavily criticised because of their not putting this as a priority. So can you assure us that there are no Salford children involved? Thank you.
Well, I thank you for that question. And the first thing I've got to say is that anybody who's read the report must be struck with a sense of horror about the way those cases were handled in another local authority. And clearly, you know, that sort of behaviour, had it taken place in Salford, would have been completely unacceptable to this authority, and we would not have pursued the same line that was pursued elsewhere. So that's the first assurance I can convey. I'm always conscious when I'm asked a question like this, is that yes, I can say that to my knowledge, there are no such cases in Salford where we've been found to be at fault. I've spoken to the City Mayor at length about it. I understand that this report is going to be effectively in 3 parts. The second part is going to cover Rochdale, and the third part is going to cover the authority, the rest of the authorities. But to my knowledge, To my knowledge, there has been no major issues of concern raised about the way that Salford have dealt with those cases. Where they're raised, we would want to deal with them as urgently as possible. But you've been on corporate parenting for a long time, and obviously we've tried to make sure that any matters of concern are brought to bodies such as that so that people can deal with it. So it's a regrettable situation, it's a horrendous situation for the whole of Greater Manchester that needs to tackle it. But in terms of individual cases in Salford, I'm not aware of any that affect Salford at the moment.
Any further questions to Councillor Mary? Comments? Councillor Bill Hines, any questions? No. Councillor Kelly, any questions? Councillor Lancaster, any questions?
I've got a question from Councillor Saunders.
I'm sorry, we'll come back to Councillor Saunders. You have another question?
He does have a question he's told us about.
Saunders, Councillor Lightner. Thank you, Councillor Lightner. Councillor Lancaster.
First of all, the question of the recycling centres. I thank you for agreeing to defer this till we have a meeting tomorrow. Recycling rates haven't gone up as a historical one. Well, I'm going to ask, and Robin will support me on this, that with each recycling centre, we want the recycling figures for each one. Because what you're quoting is one site rather than all the sites we've got. So it may be that one site's not performing as well as others, but it's, as I referred to in my earlier presentation, it's critical that members scrutinise very closely the contract to make sure that they are performing. I've no indications offhand that they're not performing. In fact, the indications we've got in the report tomorrow say they are performing. But I'll come back to you on those figures. Can I come about litter and the dropping of cigarette ends? I'm quite strongly of the view that we should prosecute anybody who drops litter. I don't care where it is, and whether that's dumping of, in back alleyways or anywhere else. I've been very keen to ensure that we try where we can to identify who's the culprit, and we prosecute the culprit of who dumped that rubbish in the first place. And I think that's something we need to do. I've got to say what we get an unfair service in the City Council, because in those areas, and the majority of areas, there's no dumping of rubbish. The areas are kept clean and the residents respect the area they live in. And why should they suffer because some areas don't abide by the recycling rules and dump rubbish? To me, that needs prosecution, and that we've been successful in a number of prosecutions, we'll continue to do. One thing I'm looking at is actually whether we can use CCTV better than we currently got, where we know there's hotspots, because what I'm getting is in certain areas, month after month, I'm going back to the same streets as what we've done previously. So we've got to tackle them head on and clearly deal with the ones which are not prepared to abide by what is considered to be good citizenship. And it's something quite strongly I believe we should succeed in doing. On cigarette ends, I'm aware of the one prosecution, and there was an appeal about that prosecution, but the appeal was not held. It was agreed that the fine should take place. I still think the same should happen to cigarette ends. There's nothing worse than dumping of cigarette ends in streets, and that's something we should discourage people from doing. The lady did have an opportunity in question to actually appeal against that decision, and the appeal was turned down. So therefore, I'm supportive of the decision which has been taken.
Thank you. I'm not sure whether this is the right place to do it, but Councillor Lancaster does also do the elections, the committee that deals with that. No, deals with that.
It rigs them.
No, the electoral working party. Electoral working party, and so I'm not sure whether I can ask him a comment or not today.
Ask the city mayor.
I could ask the city mayor.
He
He'll
likes
answer
answering
it.
every.
I'll ask the city mayor, he'll answer me.
He loves it.
Or he'll pass it on to councillor.
Can we have any questions or comments to Councillor Antrobus? Councillor Hesling. Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'd just like to follow on from Councillor Lancaster and Letner about the article in the MEN. I have been working with this resident quite intensively. I've been and visited the street on many, many occasions. I've worked with the residents in the street. I've worked really hard with these people. We're all very aware. And I'd like to say the neighbourhood teams have been fabulous. They've been going all the time. It's tireless and it's endless dealing with this issue. And I think we all know it's about people's behaviour. I've been there late at night where it's been cleared, the alleyways have been cleared, been back the next day, there's bags and bags of it. So I think the camera right, it's nobody's fault in here, it's people's behaviour, and I can't speak highly enough of the neighbourhood teams. The clearing places where they don't even own, they've done a marvellous job. I know what they've done, and I know this lady and I know this resident, and like I say, it is quite depressing really, looking at what people are having to live in this environment and with this rubbish, all kinds of rubbish. It's awful, it really is. So I'd be really pleased if we can fund cameras on our hotspots. And also, in this particular area, the resident was made aware before Christmas that we're starting a brand new pilot study, and it happens to be that area, one of the hotspots, where it's a year-long, long-term intervention, where we're having We're going to put some flower baskets and things in, and we've got quite a lot of residents that have come forward to help us out, which is superb, because we have a lot of residents that actually love their area, and, you know, and they're living in this squalor. It's awful for them, and people are so frustrated. I understand where they're coming from. So that was just for clarification. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Councillor Collison, and can I just say you're going to be the last question before we have the break.
Thank you. Just very briefly, really, back on the same subject. I've just returned from Singapore. I don't know if anybody's been there, but I have never experienced a more efficiently run and clean city in my life. There's no graffiti, there's no litter. Chewing gum is illegal. If you drop a piece of litter, it's $200. If you drop 2 pieces of litter, it's $600. You're not allowed to leave the country until all fines have been paid. And I know that sounds as if it's very harsh, but it seems to work. And everybody is so proud of where they live. They take ownership of where they live. And if anybody dropped a piece of litter, somebody behind them would say, pick it up. And it's not, what we're looking at here, I think, is symptoms. We're not looking at causes. It goes back to education again. People need to take pride in the area that they live in. And you're not going to drop a piece of litter in a clean street. If it's a messy street, why not just throw it out the window or throw it on the street? It's about education, and I think that's where the problem is. It's not about just dealing with it because it's a problem and we need to get rid of those bags of rubbish. We need to educate people to understand that it's not acceptable and they need to take pride in where they live. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Collinson. We're going to take the break now for 10 minutes, and then we come back to Councillor Antrus. But first of all, we're going to have a response from Councillor Lancaster.
Just to make the point, and I think it's important that we recognise that education in schools is critical on recycling, and we should encourage people to recycle as best we can. We've won awards in this city for the improvements in cleanliness of the city, and we shouldn't recognise that the majority of the city is a clean city, and the citizens in it are a pride. In fact, a number of citizens in this city are helping with the clean-up procedures which happen on a regular basis. And that's something which we are pleased with. But I come back to my original presentation. As far as I'm concerned, it's critical that we deal with those who don't comply. And that's, if they can't comply, I've been warned about it on a number of occasions, we need to look clearly at prosecution, and we look for resident support in recognising and indicating who the responsible people are. So I do think it's something we've got to tackle. It's important that we continue to do it. It's national, it's not just in Salford. But certainly it's not right that a service should deteriorate in another part of the city for the sake of those people who dump rubbish and continually do it. And it's something we're going to deal with quite strongly.
Thank you, Councillor Lancaster. We're going to break now for 10 minutes, and we'll come back. We'll then have questions to Councillor Andrews and to Councillor Reynolds before we go to the City Mayor. So break for 10 minutes. Thank you. Please be seated. Where we start is questions to Councillor Antrobus. Any questions? Councillor King. Councillor King.
Me? You? Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair of the Council. Will Councillor Antrobus or Jones please explain what's happening to the railways in the north of England, the level of services, the quality of service, performance of the operators and so on? And I understand that the new Secretary of State for Transport is going to decide on HS2 relatively soon. And if the SHAPS chap does decide to support the HS2, do you think that we should begin to build it out from the north first, where you get better value for money? Thank you, Chair.
Can I refer that question to Councillor Jones?
Thanks, Chair. Dealing with the railways is quite a difficult thing to do, and I'm sure Councillor Turner and his colleagues will remember some of the history in recent years. But let me just remind you of a couple of Secretaries of State for Transport. The first one was Chris Grayling, who was appointed around 2016. And he fell for the lot of when they decided to do the timetable changes in 2018. And he made the classic mistake on Radio 4, I don't know whether you remember this, where when he was trying to answer why things were in such chaos, he said, well, I don't run the railways. And of course, he got immediately the question, well, if you don't run them, who does? And of course, the problem with the railways, they are run by the government and by the Department for Transport. And that's the problem, partly, that there's no decentralisation or there's no opportunity for local people and local councillors to get involved in how the railways run. The second Secretary of State is the current one, Grant Shapps, who, again, I don't know whether you heard what he said, but I'm sure Councillor Turner will know, because I'm such a boring person. When he was answering questions on Channel 4, I actually recorded it so I could go back and listen to exactly what he said. And again, he made the classic mistake. The commentator said to him, are you going to take the franchise off Northern because it's such a disaster? He answered, yes. He said, yes, we are. And then within 1 hour, the Department for Transport issued a clarification to say, well, the Minister was right to say that. However, he's starting a process. And that means, no, they're not going to take the franchise off Northern at the moment, but that's a possibility for the future. So the answer to Councillor King is that nobody knows exactly what will happen. But the one thing I can say to you is that most people who are not involved in railways don't know that the government have set up a company to deal with this kind of situation if and when a franchise fails. And on the East Coast Main Line, they have actually set this company to actually run it. Now, you won't like me saying this, but what they've actually done is put it back into public ownership from the privatised situation it was in before. And as far as I know, East Coast Main Line services are now running reasonably well compared to how they were some time ago. The other issue I just wanted to mention briefly, because there's quite a few issues, but I'll just finish on this. The government did set up under Chris Grayling the Williams Review, which is taking place, and I suspect it's been interrupted by the general election and other matters, and certain things from that Williams Review have already been revealed. But the Secretary of State has promised there will be a white paper on the future of the railways, and the Williams Review is a root and branch review of exactly that. Just a final thing, Councillor King threw in High Speed 2. And again, there's so much you could say about this, but let's put it this way. High Speed 2 was agreed something around 2009, there or thereabouts, and it's got the support of all three major political parties, and that consensus has stayed until today. So I've no evidence that apart from reviewing it, because of course the capital costs of all these major schemes go up. But I would remind you that every time London has a rail scheme that overruns and overshoots and overspends, they still carry on with it and find the money for it because it benefits London. Whereas obviously High Speed 2 will have a massive benefit for the North and the Midlands of this country, and the investment is crucial. But in terms of answer to Jim's question, it's probably too late, Jim, now, but we have raised more well, we've raised it on umpteen occasions, especially at the Transport Select Committee, that there's no reason why the work couldn't start in the north. It doesn't have to necessarily be from London northwards. It can be from the Manchester area southwards, if you look at it that way, and across to Leeds and so on. So those are big issues, but as far as I know, High Speed 2, if it gets the go-ahead, they've already spent £4 billion, by the way, up to date. So you can see there's a colossal amount of investment there. But in terms of the railways in the north...
Could you start to wind up, Councillor Jones, please? Councillor Merry.
Thanks. I just wanted to comment on the answer I've just heard, actually, which I think is a very accurate rendition of the situation that we're in at the moment. But the reason I want to comment is because Northern Rail has become a byword for incompetence on the railways. Now, you might say, well, why is that important to Salford? Well, every station in Salford is actually served by Northern Rail. They are the critical operator as far as we're concerned. And for Grant Shapps to talk about one option being to give them a short-term contract while he tries to sort it out strikes me as absolutely appalling. The only answer is to use what's called the operator of last resort, which is in effect taking it into public ownership. I'll just give you some quick quotes from what I've been told recently. I've been told that trains have been cancelled because most of the trains are in for repair. Now, that seems to me a rather incompetent level of management to put all your trains in to be surfaced at the same time. I've been told that trains have been cancelled because of a shortage of drivers. Apparently, Northern, when they took on the West franchise, didn't realise that overtime on Saturday and Sunday was voluntary for drivers on this side of the Pennines as compared to compulsory on the other side of the Pennines, and forgot actually that that was the case and scheduled a load of trains on a Saturday and Sunday, which they have then had to cancel. And the final thing which I was concerned about was on the new trains, there's actually a fantastic bit which tells you what stations they are going to stop at. And I got on a train and it said it was going to stop at Swinton, for example. Apparently, that is a mistake by management who programmed the trains incorrectly on the software to indicate it was stopping at Swinton when in fact it wasn't stopping at Swinton. Now, with management like that in the private sector, you know, you do realise that the public sector could do a lot better job than that actually in running the trains. And please, on the Conservative side, rush to defend Northern Rail. Rush to defend Northern Rail as a great example of private enterprise, or actually join with us and say that we in Salford are entitled to a decent service, and the only people that appear to be able to provide that is actually by taking it into public ownership.
Thanks, Chair. Before Christmas, Councillor Antrobus arranged a very informative and interesting policy forum on climate change. And obviously I'm very pleased that Salford Council earlier in the year passed a motion agreeing to a climate crisis, declaring a climate crisis quite rightly. But I think the presentation that we heard really highlighted and opened members' eyes about the scale of change that was needed and also the speed of which it was needed. You know, clearly the later we leave this, the worse the impact gets. I wonder if following that, Councillor Antrobus could give an update on some of the work taking place in this area and also what the next steps are going to be going forward over the years ahead.
Councillor Antrobus.
I'm very grateful to Councillor Hesling for raising that issue, and I'd like to thank all members of the council who participated in that policy forum. I think it really drove home to us all the difficult choices that we face in the future if we are to make sure that our city is tolerable for future generations. The next meeting of the Climate Action Board will consider the outcomes of the deliberations of the policy forum. There are a number of issues that we are taking forward. I've asked for a report to be produced on how we can extend carbon literacy throughout our organisation. The City Mayor has taken a great lead on carbon literacy, and until everybody in the organisation, everybody in the city understands the contribution that they make, then we won't progress with the wider ambition. So that's an important starting point for future development. The climate emergency resolution called on us to try to influence the Greater Manchester Pension Fund to divest in carbon investment, so we're actively looking at ways in which we can support the pension fund in doing that. But we ourselves are ramping up our ambition, and I'm really delighted to be able to say today that we have put in a bid for funding for a 2 megawatt solar array, which will be on underused council land. It is dependent on the funding from the European Union, and we've still got that funding stream available. But that will make a significant contribution to meeting our targets. We're also going to review all the other underused land in council ownership, see whether there's the potential for further arrays there, and we are carrying out a survey of all council buildings to look at their capacity for solar arrays. So hopefully the very next step will be that Salford will become genuinely a solar city. And of course, anything that we do to generate more renewable energy is important, but don't forget that thanks to the City Mayor, in our procurement, we make sure that we only purchase renewable energy in order to power the city's services and the city's buildings. So I think that that is a great step forward that we're making already.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I thought during the break I actually walked into a bit of a time warp and Salford City Council were providing free lunches, but it was actually for Heather's birthday, so happy birthday, Councillor Fletcher. And I just wanted to start by thanking so many of you for the warm welcome since I joined the council. It's one of the greatest honours of my life to walk in the footsteps of my dear and late friend, John Ferguson, and I know if I could be half the councillor he was, I would have done a good job for the people of Pendlebury. Just a very brief question to Councillor Reynolds about an issue that's very close to my heart since losing my granddad to dementia late last year. We have an ageing population. Are we ensuring here in Salford that we have adequate provision for people living with dementia? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Any other questions or comments to Councillor Reynolds? Nope. Okay, agenda number 16, schedule reports from board meetings. You did get these as part of the minutes. They are for note only. If you do have any questions, then please refer the questions to the Councillor August and Councillor... Yes?
Sorry, Chair.
If you refer to Councillor August and Councillor Linden, I was right. Can we revert now back to the City Mayor's, the City Mayor's statement?
Okay, Chair of the Council, members of the Council, welcome to the first Council of the new year, and Happy New Year to all of you. And I hope you've had an enjoyable and much needed break over the festive period and are looking forward to what we can achieve together in the new year. And like Councillor Bailey has already said, thank you, Councillor Fletcher, for the refreshments and the kindness and hospitality you've shown in the break in celebration of what I understand will be a really important birthday tomorrow. So many happy returns for your birthday tomorrow. But before we begin formally our council address and proceedings, I'd like to pay my respects to the commitment, to the work and the memory of Councillor Peter Connor. Peter was an exceptionally dedicated and much loved councillor, championing many causes for those often greatest in need in our city. He led the way for many years in housing and later in adult social care, laying the foundations which has helped so many across our city. Peter was well respected by his fellow councillors here in this chamber and also in the ward of Kersal and the community of Kersal that he served for many years, with great commitment to the Jewish community there and the broader community of Kersal. Peter was always someone you could approach in the knowledge that he'll help in any which way he could to the best of his abilities, often being passionate about those suffering poverty, inequality, or those feeling disenfranchised in some way or another, committed ultimately to improving the lives of the people of our city. Peter, in many respects, encapsulated what we often refer to as the spirit of Salford. And he will be deeply missed. And my thoughts and our thoughts and prayers remain obviously with Mary and Peter's family and his friends at this really sad and often difficult time. I'd also like to welcome Councillor Damien Bailey to the City Council, and I'd like to congratulate you and the residents of Pendlebury for supporting a Labour councillor. You've already heard from yourself about standing in the shoes of Councillor John Ferguson. Those are indeed big shoes to be standing in, and we expect great things from you, Councillor Bailey. Damien's election, in many respects, is testament to the value that the people of Salford place in the Labour Party in this city, and I look forward, and my mayoral team looks forward to working with you in the interests of the people of this city. And it's quite clear to me that Damien's already hit the ground running, asking a question of lead member in his inaugural full council meeting, so you are certainly following in Councillor Ferguson's footsteps. So thank you very much and welcome to this City Council. Now, it would be safe to say that the results of the election on December the 12th were not what I, nor many in this chamber, would have anticipated or wished for. Although we retained our seats in Salford, many long-standing Labour areas in Greater Manchester and the north of England changed hands in a historic night which has changed the face of British politics. And although I personally viewed the result with great sadness, there are some comments I'd like to make and certainly reflect and take away from that. Firstly, the people of this country voted for Brexit, and they confirmed to us on the 12th that the results of the referendum must and shall be adhered to. Brexit will happen. It'll have profound and, in many cases, challenging implications for our economy, our society. But it is the democratic will of this nation which must be respected. And secondly, I'll be frank. My party's campaign, in my opinion, could have been better organised and more effectively communicated, with a clear narrative, a clear structure around our manifesto. And for me, who's responsible for that? Well, clearly the party's machinery, the Labour Party, the leader's office, and how that then is cascaded up and down the country. And for me, what this does is it necessitates serious reflection, listening and consideration for future potential leaders of my party, but also for party members and also the broader movement. We must listen to each other, listen to the broader Labour movement, and listen, more importantly, to the people of this country in how we move forward. And lastly, voters in the north of England and many other post-industrial areas of the country are clearly feeling left out, disenfranchised, and arguably rightfully angry. The anger must be understood, in my opinion, and understood by all parties. It is very real pain that people are feeling, whose prospects and life chances they feel have often been cut short. And I believe that the Labour Party's manifesto had some of the answers to the issues that we're facing here in the United Kingdom. Our Green New Deal would have brought environmentally sustainable industrial growth back to the country, especially those post-industrial parts of the country that have been suffering for many, many years. And based on a strategic approach to infrastructure-led development. And when I talk about infrastructure-led development, I'm not just talking about the physical there. It's about thinking about how the social, the economic, and the environmental interact in terms of the interplay between people and the physical environment we all inhabit. And our National Investment Bank would have provided vital funds available for industries to upskill, to update, and find new capital for their plants, technology, research and development, and innovation. And our infrastructural investment programme would have put money into roads, schools and hospitals and transport in these regions to enable prosperity and growth to return. But it remains to be said that Labour lost these people by continuing what I feel was a national trend in politics, of London-centric politics, which began under Thatcher, intensified under Blair, and has been continued by every administration since. This is an exclusionary, it's an elitist form of politics which has excluded many people from public life, culturally, organisationally, and politically. It's a politics, ultimately, as far as I'm concerned, that must end. London, as we all know, is important economically and industrially to the success of Britain. But so too are many cities, many towns, many villages and communities outside of London and the South East. And rebalancing the economy and reforming our political system requires decisive action, not just warm words or political rhetoric. Boris Johnson has made many, many promises to the people of these areas. Promises which I'm sceptical as to whether or not they'll be delivered and kept. And with early indications from the first few months suggesting that U-turns are already being planned in many key areas. The date of the planned Brexit is already being delayed, and discussions of the transition period being extended is on the table. The mastermind behind the Vote Leave campaign, this was the campaign which lied to the British public saying we would be getting £350 million extra per week into our NHS, obviously spearheaded by Dominic Cummings, has already been seen on Twitter discussing with Dr. Alan Green, conceding that there are lots of things that could happen or not happen, as may be the case, which would make him, that's Dominic Cummings, wish Leave had not actually won the referendum. Johnson's proposals to end the legislative alignment of Britain and the EU could lead to this being dragged into a conflict in the House of Lords, who believe that the proposals in the current withdrawal agreement passed by Parliament would force courts up and down the country to reinterpret all case law, creating legal chaos in our country. And from pledging during his campaign the chance of no deal was absolutely zero, recent comments from the Prime Minister in his first interview of the new year suggest that no deal is in fact still a very real possibility. We are still faced with vague promises on social care, with no dates for the promised reforms that were pledged during the election. We know in this chamber still no green paper, and yet again, government forcing councils up and down this country to hike the adult social care precept by 2% again to pay for social care. In addition to that, I would just say be cautious about what you're reading in the press and the media. Colleagues may have seen the BBC reporting that Swinton is to receive £25 million from the government. I just want to inform this council chamber that that certainly is not the case. I, nor the chief executive of this local authority, have had no indication that Swinton, in terms of reviving the town centre, is to receive £25 million. What I understand is happening is they are offering support and help. So we will continue to engage with the department on this, but I just want colleagues in this chamber to be aware that, you know, BBC running headlines saying that Swinton is to receive £25 million, as far as I am concerned, is very, very misleading and concerning. There has been no numbers set on the promised investment, as we've already heard, in northern infrastructure and investment in the north of England. And I welcome the government's ending of the Northern Rail franchise, given their sustained underperformance, which has been a matter of public record and regularly reported on through our combined authority here in Greater Manchester. But the idea that simply extending the franchise to another company without significantly upgrading and investing in infrastructure as some sort of panacea to solve the problems is misleading at best. And Jake Berry's, the Northern Powerhouse Minister's insistence that Transport for the North and Andy Burnham share the blame for the failure of Northern after their repeated insistence over many years that government and Northern were failing and we need intervention is nothing short of shameful reinvention of recent history. And government's policy of revoking the huge successful policy of citywide landlord licensing in Liverpool has had a chilling impact on Greater Manchester's plans to properly regulate our private rented sector, protecting tenants and challenging the Dickensian housing conditions that continue to blight and plague millions of our residents in the city region and thousands up and down the country. The value of such promises from the current government, in my opinion, is yet to be seen. Meanwhile, rather than obviously wait around for the government for such promises to materialise, we've been busy here in this council doing what we do best, fighting for the interests of the people of Salford. And it was my pleasure last week to open Route 29, the new care scheme for young people and those on the edge of care, which has been co-designed by young people who've been through the care system or had direct experiences of services in the city. The scheme has seen us provide a fabulous new facility, including a gym and recreational areas for young people who could have potentially been placed outside of our city. The scheme has seen several carers, care leavers and carers, the people involved in the care system, actually go on to employment as well. 2 individuals have gained employment through this initiative, using their own direct experiences of the care system and our services to help shape the experiences of other people in our city. This is a heartwarming story, and it's a perfect example of innovative and creative work that we've been doing in our city, whilst also helping us with budgetary pressures and representing value for money for our taxpayers in our city. It was also my pleasure yesterday to join in announcing that Islington Mill, the arts and cultural hub off Chapel Street, has been awarded more funding from the Heritage Lottery Fund, £746,000, to secure the much-needed renovations. Our shared vision is for the Mill complex, which includes New Islington Mill as well, the building adjacent, and parts of Regent's Trading Estate, placed into the hands of a community land trust or an appropriate governance structure through which rents will be set by tenants, supporting creatives, makers, people in our city which are often disenfranchised as a consequence of gentrification. Salford has always been a working city, and protecting low rents and that low rent environment is much needed for artists and creatives to survive in places like Greater Manchester. Interestingly, this was responded to in London's local plan, because they realised they were losing that creative talent to places like Paris and Berlin, and they placed it at the heart of some of their planning policies to positively respond to those challenges. But for me, I think this is a really very exciting development, and I look forward to working with Odsal councillors and the community there at Islington Mill to realise what is a fantastic initiative. The city's green agenda also continues at pace, with Friends of the Earth announcing that Salford is the most climate-friendly local authority area in the whole of the North West. And we're actually joint 5th in the whole of the country. So we're doing absolutely fantastic things here to receive that recognition from Friends of the Earth. And this is no surprise when you consider we've managed to lever in, it's not the City Council spending this on its own, £126 million worth of investment over the past 4 years into green infrastructure within our city. Investment which has seen the creation of hundreds of miles of cycle paths, new parks, River Irwell's second flood basin, huge projects like RHS Bridgewater, the 5th National Park, coming to the city of Salford, the preservation of Mossland and the renovation of many of our existing green spaces and parks across the city. And we continue to defend areas of natural beauty, such as the Broadoak site that was previously referenced from future development. And obviously we're disappointed that more public money will need to be spent continuing to defend our position in the Court of Appeal. And this is after, as colleagues know, this City Council has lost 211 million in cuts since 2010 and unfunded budget pressures. 53% of the grant we get from central government has been taken away from us since 2010 under the Tory and Lib Dem and Tory governments, whilst at the same time demands for children's and adult services continue to grow in our city. We're also committed to plans for the creation of a huge 350-hectare city forest park, and that's between both Salford City Council, Bolton and Bury, a further project to protect the preservation of natural woodland and wildlife in our city region. This green revolution, if you like, in Salford is the culmination of decades-long commitment to a green agenda, for which we are now starting to see the results. And last year, as colleagues know, we honoured the ex-serviceman Ben Walsworth with Freedom of the City, and we acknowledged his commitment to the green agenda in this city, which demonstrates the long-standing commitment of this local authority to that agenda. It was Ben's vision for open green spaces and parklands that has seen us protect, preserve and expand green provision over the course of decades, including the development of Cutacre Park, and our pioneering legal work preventing peat extraction and ensuring net biodiversity in developments. This revolution is not only opening new spaces for residents, but it's helping to preserve the city's heritage, as encapsulated in the marvellous redevelopment of the Worsley, Delph and Canal completed recently. As the national political agenda continues to evolve, many things remain to be the same, and we are in a period of real uncertainty. And in that space, Salford is still doing all it can to ensure that residents of this city have jobs to go to, things to see and do, and more importantly, hope for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, City Mayor. Any questions to the City Mayor? Councillor Turner, I believe you have a question.
Not so much question, Chair, comment. First of all, would like to wish you all a happy new year. Sometimes I sit and I wonder what I've learned by sitting here, and I think the two things that stand out this morning, don't read the MEN and don't watch the BBC News, because it all seems to be false. Well, certainly the BBC, according to the City Mayor. For the last few years, I've sat here amongst the rest of you, and we've listened to the City Mayor lambasting our government, because it is our government. It's not my government or your government. It's our government. It's the people's government. You could say one nation government. And the City Mayor has been extolling the virtues of socialism. I don't know what he really means by socialism, but you no doubt explain. The socialism read by a Mr. Jeremy Corbyn, whose views have been endorsed by the City Mayor, whose statements to the Council are enthusiastically applauded by his loyal members. This is followed by a pre-planned question session by his members, giving the City Mayor the opportunity to endorse very often the same themes as his earlier statements. The City Mayor has consistently told us just how a Labour government would be the answer to all the country's problems, and he touched on it today. He touched on it today. Well, we all know what the people of the country thought about Mr. Corbyn and his loyal helpers and their manifesto for the many. It was, and it is, an unmitigated disaster. It really is. It is. It's the sort of ranting and ideology that's spouted by the City Mayor and others that have been unequivocally rejected by the people of this country. The country will not support socialism. Labour's worst result in seats lost since 1935, their fourth consecutive defeat at the general election, a party that constantly failed democracy. And again, the Mayor touched on it, and to be fair, he admitted, by failing to support the result of the 2016 referendum. They dithered and delayed. Since the election, they are still proposing yet more of the same, Graham Stringer excluded. Well, Mr. Corbyn and Mr. McDonnell are on their way out. It's interesting that the runners for replacing Mr. Corbyn have all consistently voted against democracy, and one of them, when asked, even gave Jeremy Corbyn 10 out of 10. If that's the best they have, they are in a bad way. They really are. I mean, I wish that person was my teacher when I was at school. I'd have been marvellous. I was nearer the 4 out of 10 than the 10 out of 10. It was a ludicrous manifesto of promises, a shopping list longer than most people, taking the country not forward but backwards to the 1970s. I've constantly reminded members opposite in this chamber there is no chance the people of this great country will tolerate the extreme left that the city mayor supports. Yeah. Well, the date December the 12th proved that us on this side of the chamber are in tandem with the people of this country. Labour as a party are a total failure, a party of protest, and that's what they're very good at. No doubt they will continue to do so. In fact, they did. McDonnell was on the picket lines straight after the election, nearly. They're not fit to govern, and it's time that they accept that. We will learn nothing from listening to you. The country will be safer and stronger under the Conservative Party. But I thought I would finish by informing the Council that the government has awarded £250 million of money for the Transforming Cities Fund to the GMCA, of which I think we're bidding for £3 million for cycling and such things from that fund, directly or indirectly. 8 million to the GM violence reduction, 474,500 for Salford for the homeless. The Swinton Town Centre will be the first in the pilot scheme for the Futures High Street Fund. So you're right, there has been no promise. That I don't know where BBC got the 25 million from, but it certainly wasn't from the government. So there we are. Thank you very much for your tolerance.
Councillor Fletcher.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you everybody for your lovely wishes on my birthday. And the refreshments were because you've all been so kind to me over the past 4 years, and I wanted to say thank you in this particular way. By the way, there's loads of sandwiches left, so please finish them off after the meeting. I don't actually want to speak about anything political. I want to mention a few words about the late Councillor Peter Connor, who I've been a resident of Kersal for the past 16 years, so he was obviously my local councillor. What I liked most about Peter was his directness, didn't beat about the bush, said things as they were, and it was just 6 years ago that I phoned him up and I said, Councillor Connor, I think I'd like to be a councillor now. What can I do? How can I start? He says, I'll be with you in about half an hour. I thought, oh, he's very enthusiastic. And he comes along with Councillor Anne-Marie Humphreys, and they had a huge bag both sides. And I said, oh, would you like to stay for coffee? He says, no, not really. I said, but I would like to be a councillor. He says, yes, I realise that. He says, well, this is how you start. He said, you see that bag and you see that bag, deliver them. Of course, loads of leaflets. And that, to me, was Peter. And I just want to re-quote him. I do like his saying. He always used to say that there are no geniuses in this world, just lots of people who think they are. So, R.I.P. Peter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Mary.
Well, I was listening to Councillor Turner's remarks with great interest, actually, even if he was reading them out. Right, I did want to make a serious point to him, though, about what has happened to the Tory party in the past with big majorities. Let me take, for example, the signing by the Tory party of the Munich Agreement in the 1930s. They did that, right? They did that because they believed that what the country wanted was peace and it would be safer and stronger, to quote Councillor Turner's remarks as a result. What happened? Immediately within a few months, they had to reverse their policies. They promised us peace in our time, at that moment in time, the men of Munich, in the Tory party, and what did they do? They actually were forced into the Second World War, which led to the creation of the best government, in my view, the most socialist government that we've had in 1945, that delivered on public ownership and the National Health Service. So we mustn't get too downhearted by a Tory majority. A Tory majority can easily be reversed, particularly when you bear in mind, if you look at the number of votes cast for each party, actually the Tory vote fell effectively in percentage terms, right, and actually more people voted, as a matter of fact, for parties supporting the second referendum than did actually for Get Brexit Done. That is the reality of the situation. But all right, we have to accept the fact they won the election and that they're implementing their policies. But let's just quickly examine their policies. First of all, we've seen a betrayal of all the promises Theresa May made to the country in the previous bill. Gone are all the environmental safeguards that were promised. Gone are all the safeguards in terms of workers' rights that were promised. And most shameful of all, and I'm surprised that Councillor Collinson thinks this is great, right, is most shameful of all is the abandonment of their commitment to unaccompanied refugee children who are seeking asylum in this country. As far as Johnson's concerned, no, we won't put it in the bill, right, because we thought that was forced upon us by the House of Lords. And today, what did we find? We found when Northern Rail have betrayed the people of Salford, have actually provided an appalling service for the whole of the North West. What did the Conservative Party in this chamber have to say about it? Absolutely nothing. They refuse to defend the people of Salford because they believe in private enterprise and because they weren't prepared to criticise a private company. We heard about their commitment to environmental standards as a government, but they're being abandoned because they want to support Flybe. They're abandoning the passenger tax in order to actually ensure that the company continues to fly and that people are encouraged to fly. What's happened to all the environmental commitments that Johnson promised us? And most telling of all, what did a former Trump official say on the radio this morning? If you want a free trade deal with America, you are going to have to be tied to the apron strings of America and do exactly what America tells you in respect of your foreign policy. That's the only way that you will get a free trade deal with America. So far from being safer and stronger, I believe that this government will put us all at risk, quite frankly. It's actually, unfortunately, going to seek a deal with America. We're going to be slavishly following the foreign policy of the United States. We've got a government where Johnson promises one thing and fails to deliver on it. No environmental protection. As the Mayor pointed out, he will determinedly attack the market, the private landlords market, and support the private landlords rather than the ordinary tenants. This is not a government for the ordinary people, as Johnson promises it. It is a government for the private sector, delivering for the private sector, supporting his mates from Eton, and not supporting the people of Salford. And we will campaign, we will hold them to account. Of course we will talk to them. Of course we will seek the best possible deal. But at the end of the day, we know that Johnson is not really interested in the North except as lobby for getting his Brexit deal through. So above all else, I felt very depressed, obviously, by the election. I now feel inspired, especially by things that the Mayor has said and elsewhere, to fight this government and to fight on behalf of the people of this city and the people of the North West.
Councillor Saunders.
Thanks, Chair. Before I join the political fray, can I, as a ward colleague of the late Councillor Peter Connor, just add my tribute? I did circulate an email to all council members, which I won't repeat, but I refer you all to that just before Christmas. I would just like to add one final point that I think his epitaph should be a conversation I had with a constituent of ours, as it was, who told me that literally 2 days before he sadly unexpectedly passed away, he said to this constituent, I'm not going to be seeking re-election again in May, but that does not mean that you should not feel free to contact me afterwards about any issue you would like me to raise with the council. I think that says it all, and that should be his epitaph. Now, joining the political fray, as you all know, I was a candidate to the election, but narrowly lost. The mayor, city mayor, in the last meeting declared that all Salford seats were safe, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, he said was the reason why the government doesn't invest in places like Salford. Well, I'm pleased to say that we can now say that not all Salford seats are safe seats. At least one is now a marginal, maybe, according to the mayor's logic. That's why the government are now starting to invest in Salford, or continuing to invest in Salford. And finally, if I can just say that the local Labour MPs clearly are all in unison, because I note that Barbara Keeley MP, who beat me, nominated Keir Starmer as the Labour leadership election candidate, not her local colleague, and Graham Stringer nominated Lisa Nandy. So it's great to see our local MPs all singing from the same hymn sheet. In fact, looking down the list, I think the only MP in Greater Manchester, I stand to be corrected, just having a quick look, the only MP in Greater Manchester who actually nominated Rebecca Long-Bailey, besides herself, was her good friend Angela Rayner. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to associate myself with the comments made by the City Mayor, by Councillor Saunders and others about Councillor Connor. While many members in this chamber will remember him as a councillor, as a colleague, growing up in Kersal, I remember him as a councillor representing myself, my family, my community, and as I say, growing up in Kersal, we knew he was the go-to man for any issue we needed, if it was personal or community. As Councillor Fletcher said, he was direct, and he wasn't just direct, he was very, very much breathed Kersal. I think it was must have been the last meeting which he attended, or one of the last meetings he attended as a councillor. We were discussing funding for East Salford, and he called out from the end of the room, he called out, is Kersal getting its fair share of this budget? That's what he was all about, making sure that Kersal got its fair share. I also wish to pay tribute on behalf of the Jewish community in Salford, of which Peter was a long-standing friend, and he really understood their concerns. I'm happy to hear that the City Mayor has crossed the floor and now agrees that it's time to deliver on Brexit. And I'm sure his office is... I'm sure his office is preoccupied with celebrations and festivities to take place at the end of the month. Can you confirm whether the Union flag will be flying over Town Hall?
Councillor Hines. Councillor Hines.
Thank you, Chair. Well, things have been said about Peter Connor, and I would endorse everything that is said about Peter and his commitment to ordinary people throughout this city and throughout the years that I've known him. And it's very, very sad that he has now departed. But my thoughts at the minute are with Mary and the family. They've been through a terrible period this last 12 months. You know, with the granddaughter tragically dying in a car that hit her in Monton. So my thoughts are really with them, and I can't say much more about that, but Peter will be sadly and surely lost. Right, so we get now to the election. Well, obviously, I can understand the Conservatives being happy in that way. They've got a government that they support. But I don't think many of them support Boris Trump. That's a bloody mistake, isn't it? Tweedledee and Tweedledum, aren't they? Both of them together. But yeah, as from my side and my political views, it was very, very disappointing indeed. Although, I've got to say, as I was campaigning, and we had a very good result in Salford, my constituency, there was issues, and issues that I knew was going to be there. There were issues about Brexit. Without a doubt, it was Brexit. There was the other people, maybe some of my colleagues, will dispute that that was the main problem. But it was the main problem, without a shadow of a doubt. Brexit and the way my party addressed that, I think was bad. And then there was Jeremy Corbyn, who I'm a supporter of, and still a supporter of. The vilification that that man had over 4 years, and yes, some of it from my own party, was an absolute disgrace. A total disgrace. I've been a member of the Labour Party for nearly 50 years. I've seen many elections, and I've never ever, including Michael Foot in 1983, I've never seen anybody vilified like that man was. And how he stuck that out and had the courage to stick that out needs all the praise and condemnation that we could support. It was unbelievable. And then we look at the real issue that I was supporting, not Jeremy Corbyn, but what he stood for. And that was in the manifesto. And Councillor Turner says that people don't accept the manifesto. All right, I believe that they do. I believe that they do. And I believe that if Brexit hadn't have been there, and we'd have had the time to explain exactly what was right, they would have supported the manifesto. And even Boris Johnson has to say, by the way, I'd like to thank the people of the North for lending me their vote. We'll see how long that lasts. Because at the end of the day, and why I support the manifesto, I can see nothing in what Johnson and the Conservative government are going to do to tackle the crises that are in this country. I've explained in this council time and time again, crisis in health, crisis in education, crisis in local government, crisis even in the prisons, crisis in transport, crisis. There's nothing there. What I will say, though, about Johnson, and what I will give the Conservatives, they do are good at mutating. They are good at changing. For years, we've been working under what I've termed neoliberalism. Johnson seems to be a person that's not totally adhered to neoliberalism. He's adhered to his class and what it represents, but he's now talking about populism, like many, many others across Europe and elsewhere, and America. Populism. Remember, he's throwing money now at us all. You know, we in local government have had 12, he's going to give us 12 months. He's throwing money at us, yet only 2 years ago, there was no money tree. There was no such thing. Now, the economy hasn't improved in 2 years. There's been hardly any growth. So where is that money coming from? Of course, he's got money. He's banking on the fact that people will be persuaded over the time to support his government in the short term. We will hold him account, as Councillor Merry says. We will account him not just for 12 months, but for 2 years, 3 years, or however long he's in. Because he's got no idea of supporting ordinary people. Yes, he's supporting the few.
Could you wind up, Councillor Hines? Councillor Hayes, could you wind up now, please? Thank you, Councillor Hines. Can I say that we have a list of people who want to speak, and there has to be a reply done. So if you're asking a question, could you please keep it brief from now on and allow that answer to be prepared? We have Councillor Robin Garrido.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, I suppose everything that's been said by our leader, Les Turner, I think he very clearly spelt out the position. And I'm definitely going to reduce a little bit of what I say because of that. I'm going to work slightly in reverse order because obviously Councillor Hines has just spoken, and I think I'll just mention to Councillor Hines that the difference between our party and your party is the fact that whether we personally like our leader or not, we are loyal. Yeah. You elect a leader. He is representative of the whole party. He is the Prime Minister of the country, and whether we agree or disagree sometimes on some of the issues, we are loyal and we support our policy. So let's make that quite clear. Now, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. So yeah, but we support them until we get rid of them.
Very true.
We do. Well said, Robin.
Now, can I turn to John Merrill, Councillor Merrill, because I think he actually puts the nux of the problem as far as the Labour Party is concerned. And we hear us in this council chamber month in and month out. You speak about the past. You do not speak about now and the future. That is your problem. It's what happened in 1970. It's what happened in 1945. I think Councillor Hines mentioned even going further back. It's what happened with Margaret Thatcher. You can't look at the future. You can't speak about the future. And I think that's one of the problems. That's one of the problems that you've got. Now, just looking briefly at the results of the election, right? In Worsty and Eccles constituency, you lost 11%. Your share of the vote went down by 11%. In Salford and Eccles constituency, your share of the vote went down by over 8%. So don't stand here and tell us that you've done well. You didn't do well, even in the city of Salford. And in fact, in Worsty and Eccles constituency, it is the best result ever. The best result ever, and we now have a Marsden constituency in the city of Salford, one which we definitely will be winning next time round. So let's not forget that. Now, okay. One thing I was concerned about, John, and I'm surprised you actually said it, right? But you referred to lobby fodder. That people who had voted for Johnson were lobby fodder. I think that's an insult to the people of the North, and I think we should take that back. That's a disgraceful statement to make, and you should take that back, because the people who voted...
I'm not voting fodder.
I said Johnson regarded them as lobby fodder. I didn't say I regarded them as lobby fodder, and you should take your remark back.
You meant it.
Yeah.
Now, can we just come back to the city mayor? He made some fake comments to start with, and I thought maybe he'd changed his colours a little bit. But anyway, let's just say the first mistake you made, in fact, was that you said that in the few months of this government, we haven't seen any changes. I'm sorry, it's been 4 weeks today, not months. So, let's understand we have a new government that's only been in power for 4 weeks, and in those 4 weeks, we've already made dramatic changes to the way this country is being run. And one of those changes, which is coming forward, is the fact that government needs to be decentralised, that we need to have government departments based in the regions, in the north, that we need to have ministers going with those departments. And if I was the city mayor, one of the things that I would be doing is bidding to have one of those departments based in Salford. You know, let's have it in Salford Keys, let's have it in Media City somewhere. You know, let's have one of those departments. Let's be at the centre of the action. You know, let's do what is going to benefit this city instead of moaning and moaning on about it all the time. Now, I'm not running out of time, so I'll go on very quickly. You mentioned, in fact, about Brexit. Well, you know, Brexit's now an old story, unfortunately. You know, I was a Remainer, but I accepted the result of the referendum. And once that result had been made, we had to stick by it. And that's what we did. But one of the things which concerned me about was when you referred to the various things that Boris Johnson is not including in the negotiations. You know, you spoke about employers' rights and...
Will you mind up, Councillor Garrido? Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Garrido. Councillor Collinson, I believe you wanted to speak, ask a question. No?
Thank you. Yeah, I will be very quick. And before I say what I want to say about something that's appeared in the press today, on a personal note, I have great difficulty listening to the people extolling the virtues of Jeremy Corbyn. I was brought up a child of the Troubles in Belfast. I witnessed things that none of you would ever have the opportunity, thank God, to witness. And I could never in a million years support somebody who has been reported as, and I have read about, as an IRA sympathiser. So that's my personal point. Sorry, that was just I'm not listening.
Excuse me, can we just go back to the comments? Thank you.
From Councillor Hines was mentioning where all this money is coming from. A report in The Independent today, Sajid Javid to launch 100 billion spending boost aimed at North and Midlands in budget on the 11th of March. And the money is coming from new, looser spending rules by exploiting rock-bottom interest rates are expected to allow a 100 billion boost for roads, rail, broadband and other infrastructure over the next 5 years. Thank you.
Councillor King.
I think that comment pretty much answers what I was going to say to a large degree, if it's accurate. But just to comment on Peter Connor, whom I knew for the last 30 or more years, was often campaigning with him out in Kersal and visited his house in O'Mary fairly well as well. But I also think they did a fantastic service at the cathedral. It was packed, and I met people from as far apart as Yorkshire and Blackpool and other places who knew Peter and came from all over. And if Peter was looking down from the pearly gates, I'm sure he very much appreciated that send-off. Now, the mayor mentioned, city mayor mentioned about rebalancing the economy, and that's absolutely necessary. And it will require significant investment in areas other than London and the southeast. And this is the point, and if what you say is accurate in The Independent, I haven't read it. I've also mentioned that in my notes that it will require rebalancing of the approach investment, which I understand is based on the government's Green Book. And the Green Book states that investment should be made where the greatest returns are produced on that investment. Now, when you consider that the GVA of London and South East is roughly twice that of the regions outside London and South East, then a civil servant will, of course, advise Minister, saying, Minister, the best returns on this money is in London and South East. Now, as an individual, we would probably invest our money in a bank account where it pays higher interest rates. As an individual, that's fine. But we're talking about the government of the country, and they must consider the whole of the nation and not just where they're going to get the most money out of a particular investment in a particular part of the country. And therefore, that approach must alter, because if it doesn't, then investment will continue to be made in London and the South East. And that is the challenge for this government, and the judgment will be made on you in 4 or 5 years' time if you don't do that. And I think we know what that judgment would be. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chair.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the councillor, can we revert to the Constitution and extend our time to allow Councillor Humphreys and to allow the City Mayor to come back with responses to the questions and comments that have been made? Is that agreed? Councillor Humphreys.
I just wanted to add my comments to the list of tributes that have already been made to the late great Councillor Peter Connor in the Chambers today. He was a wonderful person. He was very warm, very genuine. He genuinely was a real people person. He cared about everybody in this city. I don't know if many of you may know in this room, but he was also a foster parent as well. He fostered many children, him and Mary. He and I worked together for 14 years as a team in Kersal, and during that time, not only were we close colleagues, but we became very good friends. And we were communicating right up to the day before he sadly passed away. And so I was extremely sad when I heard that news the following day. It was very upsetting for me, and my thoughts and prayers are with Mary and the family, because I know Mary is poorly and she has been for a long time. Just to echo what Councillor King was saying, the service at Salford Cathedral was very fitting for him. It was a very warm service, and it was injected with the kind of humour that Peter would greatly have appreciated, because he was famous for his dry sense of humour, and I thought the priest was marvellous, and he did have the whole congregation laughing in parts. It was mentioned in the various eulogies how popular and well respected he was across the whole of the communities of Salford and Kersal, all the communities, and it was mentioned as well about the great respect the Jewish community also held, the esteem they held him in. So it was a wonderful service. It was a wonderful send-off for a great friend of mine, and I'm sure he's up there now having a laugh and a joke with us, and may you rest in peace, Peter, and I'll miss you terribly.
Five minutes. Are we finishing at 1:30?
Thank you. I just want to make a few comments regarding, and I'm sorry, Councillor Merry. I have to say, John, that Councillor Merry, sorry, that you don't know Boris if you think he's going to be tied to the apron strings of Trump. There is absolutely no way. The threat before the elections, right, was that America was going to take over our NHS. As I said at the last council meeting, that's never going to happen, our hospitals. So Boris will not be tied to Trump. And the point this morning that you heard on Radio 4, he did start to backtrack because he knew he'd said that it was something that he should not have said, and he started to backtrack. I have to say, you have to understand that normal people voted for Boris. just normal, everyday people who have seen and thought that they were being let down totally. We come to this council chamber and we have rhetoric after rhetoric after rhetoric. When are we going to all agree, right, that we've got one purpose on this council, and that's to represent, whether they voted Labour, whether they voted Conservative, right, is to actually represent the people and not keep knocking the government. People voted for this government, right? And you were seen, I'm sorry, on the doorsteps, you were seen in areas to be letting them down. And that's what they felt. They felt you were letting them down. With regarding the manifestos, Bill, and you can shake your head, Bill, but they did on the doorstep, right? Regarding manifestos, they don't believe what they read in a manifesto. They don't believe it. They never have believed in manifestos because there are always things that never happen. And you and I know that. Doesn't matter which party it is. They don't believe in the manifestos. But I have to just say one final thing. People on the doorstep, whether we like it or not, believed that Boris would deliver for them and their family. And that was the thing. They believed at last they had somebody, whether we like him or we don't like him, they believed that that person was going to deliver what they wanted.
City Mayor, eventually, it's your turn.
Okay, Councillor Turner, I was trying to decipher if there was a question there, but it was a long rant as far as I'm concerned, and I'm often accused of ranting. I think you were certainly ranting. Also, to position me on the extreme left, I think is absolute nonsense, and I just want to iterate that. I am, and I've told members of this council, a socialist. Does that put me on the extreme left? I don't think it does. And I'm also about pragmatism and getting things done in this city. And I think members of this council will appreciate regular updates that I bring to this forum in this chamber are about what we are doing in the city. You know, listening to questions and comments from the opposition today feels as though they've been running their own party's leadership election, when actually, you know, they are councillors in the city of Salford serving the people of our city, but seemingly not overly interested in matters of our city with their questions and their comments today. I've been listening very carefully. I've even taken notes, Councillor Garrido, so absolute nonsense. Yeah, responding to some of that. Labour's policies, interestingly, in the manifesto that Councillor Hines talked about, were polled by YouGov. And interestingly, they were incredibly popular. A lot of our policies absolutely were resonating with people on the doorstep and people in our communities here in Salford and across Greater Manchester. There were real concerns, as Councillor Hines has already highlighted, about the referendum, on whether or not we remain part of the European Union. People felt as though they'd already voted and that we were kind of turning over their democratic right to actually cast their vote. And clearly the Labour Party's position, you know, didn't resonate with the electorate. Brexit had a huge impact on the general election. And in addition to that, you do raise an important issue, and I will acknowledge this. You know, politics is about trust and it's about belief in delivery. And I concede, you know, people didn't feel as though, you know, Jeremy Corbyn, as leader of the Labour Party, could potentially deliver on our manifesto. So there was an issue there, and that came up on the doorstep when we were knocking on doors. But I have to say, when you had a conversation with members of our communities about the policy pledges and the manifesto, they absolutely believed and thought they were what the country needed. The issue was, they felt, could you actually deliver that if in government? That was their concern, if I'm honest with you, which is why I said some of our problems were about organisation and how effectively we communicated some of this. And let's not forget, we don't have the establishment on our side. You know, the Murdoch empire is never going to be singing the tune of the Labour Party, and I think we have to acknowledge that. You know, when you're dealing with the Conservative Party, you're not just dealing with the Conservative Party, you're absolutely dealing with the establishment in this country, and that's important to note that. So, other than that, I'm not going to get into the politics of personalities. I'm not going to get into the character assassinations I often see on social media. Because politics is about vision, it's about beliefs, it's about values, it's about policies. It's not about individuals, it's not about personalities. Because actually what gets things done are our policies. Is the legislation changes needed to make things happen, decisions we take on resourcing. Those are the things that make the difference. The individuals, in many respects, are secondary. And in the Labour Party and the Labour movement more broadly, we are a collective. You know, no man or woman is an island. So when we all talk about Jeremy Corbyn as though he is, you know, the only person that will lead the Labour movement and the party forward, it's very, very misleading. We are a party, we are a collective, we work together in the interests of the people of this country. And that is what we will continue to do within the Labour movement. So no, I'm not going to engage in the politics of personality. I'm not going to score Jeremy Corbyn out of 10. Jeremy Corbyn is a member of the Labour Party. Jeremy Corbyn is bound by the democratic structures of our Labour Party and our movement. I think it's an absolute silly question to ask in the first place. Councillor Fletcher, thank you very much for the refreshments today, and I've already said happy birthday for tomorrow, and thank you also for your comments on Peter Connor. I know many members of the council chamber have made comments on Peter Connor, which, you know, is fantastic to sit and listen to and hear, because he was clearly loved by many in this council chamber and many in our city. Councillor Merry, you're absolutely right to say that we are far from safe and strong when you look at the future prospects of this country. I mean, I don't know if anyone saw the front page of the Financial Times yesterday, but there's talk about, you know, there not being an economic bounce and interest rates being reduced because we are really worried about the economic future of this country. That's the Bank of England, the Monetary Policy Committee, and obviously the Treasury, all talking to each other about what's happening economically in the country. And if we're reducing interest rates further, that is a concern, by the way, Councillor Collinson, just to reiterate. That is not necessarily a good thing. What that tells us is, yeah, exactly, that there's problems with the economy. And I think Councillor Merry is right to highlight that, you know, the Brexit deal that has now obviously passed in the House of Commons doesn't safeguard environmental standards, doesn't safeguard workers' rights, and it is shocking what's happened with the Dubs Amendment around unaccompanied refugee children, asylum seekers. That is absolutely scandalous. We are a civilised nation. We are a place where people can find refuge and solace, and we are a safe place, especially for the most vulnerable in society, children from war-torn parts of the world. And it is shocking to see that that has been dropped. It'll be interesting to see how government's response to that, because I did listen intently to what you had to say, that everything isn't caught up in the Brexit negotiations, and actually we'll do some things outside of that. I guess my challenge to you on that is, well, if you're saying that, why have we not done all of those things already? You know, why aren't we improving the offer in terms of environmental standards? Why aren't we already improving workers' rights in this country? And why aren't we already, you know, improving the offer for unaccompanied refugee children in this country? You know, scandalous, to be quite frank. Councillor Merry also highlighted that, interestingly, on the issue of Northern and the problems we're facing with transport infrastructure, the opposition remained mute on those issues because, as he rightly pointed out, you genuinely do believe in the market and private enterprise, despite, you know, economists all around the world proving time and time again that neoliberalism is fundamentally flawed and failing, certainly, people in this country. And I am concerned about the future. I mean, we already saw only the other day that, you know, landlord licensing in the city of Liverpool has been scrapped by the Secretary of State. That really worries me. Again, the Tory government in hock to the private landlords up and down this country. I'm also really worried about the control that America, the USA, will actually have on what happens in this country moving forward. Councillor Saunders, thanks very much again for your comments on Peter Connor. In terms of the declaration of safe seats in the city of Salford, which, you know, I've made reference to before, I just want to add to what you said. I don't assume safety. I think the seats in the city of Salford are safe because of the hard work, commitment, dedication of members of this council, members certainly of my party and the broader Labour movement to listen, to engage, to serve their needs and aspirations in this city. So I don't want people to be thinking that somehow we take it as an assumption and we rest on our laurels in the Labour movement, because we absolutely do not. Every single vote in our city has to be fought for and won, and it's not something we ever take for granted. In terms of people's voting behaviour, again, I'm not going to get into the politics of personalities and people. People will vote for who they want to in the leadership elections within the Labour Party, and that's rightly how it should be. Councillor Leitner, just to reaffirm, I've not crossed the floor, and I think we heard from Councillor Garrido that even members of your group were supportive of staying within the European Union. So I think if we're honest with ourselves, both parties were divided on the issue of remaining in the European Union. Thank you for your comments also on Peter Connor. They are really appreciated, and I know he had great respect and trust from the Jewish community in our city and worked tirelessly to support you, and it's great to hear your comments and words in connection with that. On the issue of the Union Jack, I know the monitoring officer and city solicitor was quick to jump in on that. The Union Jack, unless you're aware, is flown from the town hall every day. So, you know, next time you're coming in, just look up and you can see it there flying high. So thanks for the question, nevertheless, on that. Bill Hines, thanks for the comments on Peter Connor. You're absolutely right. Jeremy Corbyn was vilified, and it was absolutely disgraceful how the establishment treated him, if you like. I do think, as you said, the manifesto was supported, absolutely. Brexit was a huge issue, certainly in our city. But at the moment, you know, what are we being promised by this new government in terms of tackling the crisis in health, education, local government, transport, prisons? Crisis everywhere we look at the moment. So it's great to hear this new news in the Independent. The Chancellor's currently found his magic money tree that he's been telling us all these years that he doesn't have. So I don't know what's happening there. They've clearly found some interesting fertiliser to create some magic money trees in the back of number 10 Downing Street. I do have some genuine questions about where this money's coming from, because if you look at local government finance settlement announcements recently, your government has increased council tax in this city and for local authorities up and down the country by 4%. You're increasing the adult social care precept by 2% in all of your numbers, and you're also assuming a 1.99% increase on council tax as well in the local government finance settlement I've seen for the whole of the country, by the way. So is this your money? Is this money you've suddenly found as a consequence of interest rates, as you highlighted? Or is it you're actually spending people's money here in this city and trying to pass it off as though it's your own money? We will get to the bottom of that, and I will be updating council on those matters. But it's interesting to know you found a magic money tree nevertheless. Councillor. Right. Councillor Garrido, Robin Garrido. It was interesting to hear your point about we're a loyal party or loyal members within a party, but you do support your party to get rid of your Prime Minister. So that was interesting to hear you say that, or get rid of leaders. I think you were thinking historically about it. Whether you occupy that position now is an interesting question we can probably have after council meeting. You talk about us being kind of in the past. We're not in the past, and if you've listened to many of my addresses to council, I've been telling you about what's happening in the city and the city region now. I've been also talking about how we prepare ourselves for a changing economy, a changing industry. We've been talking about the future of Media City, responding to technological and digital advancements, the fourth industrial revolution, as it's often referred to. We are absolutely not stuck in the past, and arguably that's one of the reasons why people in our city vote for us and support the Labour administration here in the city of Salford. That isn't to say we can't learn from the past, because, you know, I'm humble enough to say I think often we're standing on the shoulders of giants. I think a lot of the people who've gone before us actually are very learned people, and people who do have something to offer to the discourse and the debate and the deliberations we have today. So for me, it's not about the past. The past will always be there and we'll always learn from it. We'll act in the present, but we absolutely will have a focus on the future here in the city of Salford. On the issue of government departments moving out of London, music to my ears. As you know, we've been successful in the city of Salford with HMRC, moving to New Bailey, which has been great as part of the government programme to relocate, and that's been organised and administered through the Cabinet Office as far as I understand. But I have to say what was interesting there is you saw that as solely my responsibility. Each and every one of you are Conservative Party members, and I guess the interesting question I have is how are you going to help me, the executive, the mayoral team, but importantly the people of the city of Salford to deliver on decentralisation and moving departments out of government? Because I think we all have a role, and as members of the Conservative Party who are in government, arguably you have a very important role to play in terms of making some of that happen. So I look forward to how we can collaborate on doing that and creating jobs and opportunities for the people of Salford. Councillor Collinson, again, you made a point around what happened in Northern Ireland and the Troubles, and I absolutely understand people's position on that. Jeremy Corbyn, as you know as well, was influential in delivering the Good Friday Agreement. He was involved in that. And as far as I'm concerned, he's never really expressed sympathy for terrorists. I don't think so. From what I've read and what I've seen, I don't think he is sympathetic with terrorists. However, what I would say is these are difficult issues, and accessing reality can often be difficult. Absolutely. But like I said earlier, this isn't about the politics of personalities. In the Labour Party, we are a team. We are a collective. For me, it was never all about Jeremy Corbyn. It's about the Labour movement. It's about the party as a whole. And importantly, it's about how we interact with the people who vote for us. And that will continue to be our priority. So please, let's not denigrate things in terms of the politics of personality. Because as I said earlier, it's values, it's beliefs, it's policies, it's legislation change, it's the allocation of resources. Those are the things that transform people's lives and create opportunities and bring harmony and peace to situations as well. And we should always champion that. Chancellor's announcement on 100 million for the North, don't know anything about it. Haven't been written to. Look forward to what this all actually means. As I said earlier, at the moment, as far as I'm concerned, your government is giving us a little bit extra for social care. It's assuming a 4% council tax increase in the city of Salford. So, I've got some concerns about what this all means. Councillor Jim King made a really good point, and I'm mindful of the time. Green Book, rebalancing the economy, it's about how we do things. And at the moment, money is flooding into London and the South East. Councillor Humphreys, thanks for your comments on Peter Connor. He was a wonderful person. I agree with everything you said. And then Councillor Karen Garrido, Labour in Salford are not letting the people down. The people of this city are deeply, deeply important to everything we do in this city. And I'd like to think that you share that importance of the role that the public and the residents of the city play in everything we do. People believe Boris would deliver Brexit. You're absolutely right. There's no doubt about that. But everything else, as far as I'm concerned, remains to be seen for the city of Salford. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Just before I close the meeting, can I keep a promise to Councillor Fletcher? Although it's been said before, there's sandwiches and there's cakes. Please help yourself. I declare the meeting over.